Welcome, dear listeners, to the study of prophecy with the ardent preacher. Today, we want to look at a lesson entitled Daniel in Captivity. Daniel in Captivity. Now, this lesson is paramount to our study in that we want to understand the events that transpired and led this prophet find himself in that heathen land called Babylon. Now, I want you, dear listeners, to follow me closely because we will be unpacking some elements in the verse that we want to dissect. Today, our Bible reading will be coming from the book of Daniel chapter 1, and we'll be reading on verse 1 to 2. And my Bible reads, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah came Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God." Now, the book of Daniel was written by the prophet himself, except for the 4th chapter, which was written by the king of Babylon, who was Nebuchadnezzar. Now, it is fascinating how this prophet begins by writing his book with a directness of approach. Okay? He begins by doing this so that he highlights clearly the events that happened during that time. Now, there are some facts that he brings out so that he does not present, his writing in a fictitious manner. Now he brings out 5 facts so that if we want to look at them one by one, we'll be able to understand that yes, indeed, these events transpired in the history of Judah and Babylon. What are those facts? Number 1, the writer, who is Daniel himself, states that at the time Jerusalem was overthrown, number 1, Jehoiakim was king of Judah. It's a fact. So he brings out this fact that at the time Jerusalem was besieged, Jehoiakim was king of Judah. Secondly, that at that time Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon. Number 3, we learn that the latter came against the former, meaning that Nebuchadnezzar came against Jehoiakim. Number 4, we learn that this was in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign. All these events that we want to talk about happened in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign. And number 5, we learn that Jehoiakim was given into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, who took a portion of the sacred vessels of the house of God and carrying them to the land of Shinar, the country of Babylon. Now, these events transpired in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim. Now, Prophet Jeremiah mentioned that this event happened in the 4th year of the reign of Jehoiakim. Now, this discrepancy needs not to make us confused. We need to learn that Nebuchadnezzar began his expedition for the overthrow of Jerusalem in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign. However, this expedition was not successful in the 3rd year. Not until in the following year, in the 9th month of the reign of Jehoiakim. That's where Prophet Daniel points out. Okay? That's where Prophet Daniel reckons. However, Jeremiah reckons from that point, being the 4th year of the reign of Jehoiakim. What I'm trying to talk about, dear listeners, is that Nebuchadnezzar begins his plans, okay, began his journey of overthrowing Jerusalem in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim. However, this was not successful in the third year. Okay, there are some events which transpired and made this Nebuchadnezzar not to continue with his plan. Not until later, in the fourth year and in the 9th month of the reign of Joachim. So, Daniel reckons from the point this expedition began. And Jeremiah, on the other hand, reckons from the point this expedition became a success. Now, we understand that Daniel has been taken captive into this land during the time this Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem. Together with his counterparts, they were taken into the land of Babylon as captives. And when they reached there, the king told the chief of the eunuchs to choose among the captive youths who were without blemish, who were intelligent and noble in character, so that the king should subject them to his education and his deity, because he wanted this, that they should be assisting him in the affairs of the nations. Now, the reason why the king did this was because he understood and he knew to say there were no native Babylonian youths who were as intelligent as Hebrew boys, because many nations at that time had learned of how God had led his people in the past and how God had favored the children of Israel. Hence he knew that if only he could bring them in his kingdom and subject them to the education which he had devised, they would be suitable to run the affairs of Babylon. That's why we discover that Daniel and his colleagues were chosen, and as they were chosen, they were subjected to different kinds of treatment and different kinds of education, of which we learned that Daniel and his colleagues purpose in their hearts that they should not defile themselves with the delicacies of what? Of the king. But my main concern is not about how they chose not to defile themselves. My main concern is how Daniel found himself in Babylon and how he was identified and recognized as a wise man of Babylon. So now we discover that in the same first chapter of Daniel chapter 1, we discover that at the end of time, this king called them that he should test them to ascertain as to whether they, have been assimilating to the lessons that they were learning. And when they were brought before the king discovered that these Hebrew boys were 10 times more wiser than their counterparts. They were 10 times more wiser than their colleagues, both those who were in Babylon, the native Babylonian youths, and the Hebrew boys. These, they were astounding. They were astounding. And it's because God was them. And it's from this point that Daniel was chosen as one of the wise men of Babylon. It was at this point that Daniel was chosen as one of the wise men of Babylon, because the king observed that he had an understanding of visions, because God had given him this special gift of a prophet. Now, the fact that Daniel was talked of in the first chapter of Daniel chapter 1 as having the Spirit of God and the Spirit of understanding does not make his 3 Hebrew brothers less inferior. Does not make his 3 Hebrew brothers less inferior, because we'll see that in the coming verses, like chapter 3 of Daniel, they were delivered greatly from the fiery furnace, and this was an indication that even them, God was with them. What we are talking about is the issue of gifts that God gives. Some people have been given, gifts of prophesying. Some people have been given, gifts of doing miracles. Some people have been given gifts of healing. So now, since we are interested in the prophetic way, this Daniel had a spirit or a gift of prophecy. Now, that's how Daniel found himself in Babylon. And there in Babylon, they were tested there in Babylon, they were educated, and we discover that in whatever they did, they were astounding. And as a result, Daniel was chosen as one of the wise men. Wise men, those men who would interpret, the mysteries that the king would be faced with. In short, Daniel was chosen among those wise men of Babylon who would be solving the difficulty in unexplainable things that the king might, that the king might inquire in future. Okay, we end here, and we'll be looking forward to our next series on the study of prophecy. Shalom, shalom. May God bless you all.